There are literally hundreds, probably thousands of different tarp brands out there nowadays. Way back when I started going out camping, they're just using a tarp rather than a tent. The only ones you could really find were military type ones. This is the original British Army version. Well, I say original, but obviously after canvas and things like that. The old DPM British Army basher or tarp is actually still my favourite basher, or my favourite tarp. It's the most robust tarp I find, but it's the perfect size for one person in all of his kit, or like what was used in the military with a buddying up system. 2 men plus their bergens and their sleep system would easily fit underneath one of these tarps. They're a little bit short for hammock camping. I've never actually tried the newer British Army version. I imagine they're pretty much the same. I'll maybe get my hands on one at some point and see if there's any difference. But if I'm out on my own and I want to keep a bit of a low profile, this is pretty much always the tarp I tend to take. I've actually got probably 7 or 8 of these tarps now, just because they were so cheap that every time I went somewhere and I seen one for sale for like 10 quid, 20 quid, I would always pick it up just thinking, you know, that's a bargain, I'm going to take that. I use them for everything, not just tarps. They're great as windshields. I've used this as a motorcycle cover. And what I've recently been doing is, because I've been setting up bug out caches, I actually have one of these tarps now, and every cache that I have, bar one actually, I've got 6 caches, and I think 5 of them have these DPM tarps in them. One of them has an old DD tarp in it. But that's a video for another time. It's a very weatherproof tarp. I've never had a problem with one of these tarps leaking, whereas some of the other branded tarps, I have actually had seams and things leak on me. I've never really had a problem with any of these kind of tarps. They're very strong as well. These tarps have actually got grab handles all the way down the sides. Originally that was so it could be doubled over itself and used as a stretcher, but you can also build raised beds and all sorts of other shelters using those same handle points. Contrary to popular belief, there is no right way to set up a tarp. There's so many different tarp configurations you can set up. I mean, there's a few wrong ways. If you've set a tarp up in such a way that it's going to fall down on you in the night, or it's not providing you with cover, which is ultimately what the tarp is for. You know, if you're going to get wet or something, then you've set it up wrong. Really, what I like to do is keep it as low to the ground as possible. I don't need to be standing up in this tarp. For me, it's really just an area I can sit up in it. It's really a sleeping area and somewhere to do maybe a little bit of admin. But most of the stuff I'm going to be doing is going to be outside. I don't tend to cook or anything very often underneath the tarp. Sometimes I might get a little bit of sometimes I might brew up underneath a tarp if it's raining like it is just now, but otherwise I do everything outside anyway. Now, I like to have them low to the ground. I usually like to try and open them up all the way around so I can have a little bit of a view all around me. But what I tend to do at night time is I drop the corners quite low to the ground, and I just have this, you know, apex type shape, which is the most rain repellent configuration I think you can have. You can have it completely up to on one side, like a lean-to. That's probably the most popular way that people like to set these up on YouTube, probably because they see everybody else doing it, and also because it's good for camera angle purposes. You know, you can have a nice lean-to behind you and have the camera facing you. It's quite a nice setup as well. They're becoming a little bit harder to find, these tarps nowadays, in this DPM type configuration, because that multicam type look. And to be honest, I don't like that camouflage. It doesn't blend in as well as this camouflage does in the UK. You know, this camouflage pattern, the Disruptive Pattern Material, was designed with conflict with Russia in mind, or in Eastern Europe. We might soon see a return of this camouflage, I think, as we move away from the arid sort of deserty type camouflage. So watch this space as suddenly we see a bit of a return maybe. But yeah, it blends quite well. I like it. The only other tarp that I've got that I've heard genuinely 100% positive reviews for by people that I know use these tarps in harsh conditions was the Australian Army version of this tarp. I've never owned one, I've seen them, but they're wildly expensive for some reason, so I've never bothered to buy one. And they also have that, you know, that slightly odd Australian camel to them. This tarp is actually years old now. I even used this as a motorbike cover for a while, and I managed to put a little hole in it somewhere up here, I think. Yeah, I did that with a foot peg. If you're setting up a tarp like this, you want to make sure that you pull it fairly tight, because what you want to do is avoid any kind of dipping, because you'll end up with water pooling. This is actually my preferred method of setting up a tarp. Very low to the ground, in the A-frame configuration. This is the most low profile way you can set up a tarp without digging a shell scrape or a hole to climb inside and then put that over you as well. It's the most weatherproof way to set up a tarp by having it close to the ground. Wind doesn't come through the sides as easy as it does on a more open configuration. Rain will just run completely off of this, and as long as the ground doesn't become saturated entirely, you'll be perfectly dry under here. It's the perfect setup for snow, because you can put snow along the edges to seal up the ends even better. 2 entrances or 2 exits. One of them can be easily blocked up with your bergen or your bag. You'll still fit 2 people under here, no problem. And it's the least eye-catching setup of all the tarp configurations, I think, from afar. When you get to camp and it's dark and it's raining, you don't want to be faffing around trying to fashion yourself some sort of spike or some sort of tent peg with a stick that you found on the ground. Just carry these. When it comes to tent pegs for your tarp, tons of people on YouTube go on about, I'll just make my own tent pegs when I get to a location. But, you know, why waste the time? Just carry some tent pegs. They weigh almost nothing and they've got other uses. Now, when it comes to numbers, I tend to find that the best number of tent pegs is either 4 or 6, or in some cases 8. My preference is to carry either 4 or 6 plastic tent pegs. These tent pegs are incredibly strong, very light, super durable, a little bit easier to find, but you can get them in all colours of course, and have a multitude of other uses as well, like just about everything. The most important one being, you know, you can set these on fire. It's a great way of having sure fire. It doesn't matter if you get this wet, you just dry it off, easy to make fire. But in addition to the 4 of these, I usually carry at least 2 of these lightweight, cheap aluminium type pegs. The ones that are rounded, because I tend to use these as either an additional peg for the centre part of my tarp, or in most cases I use them as a spike hitch. These are the easiest because they're quite thin but they're strong. These are far better as a spike hitch than a stick that you find on the ground, and much easier to use than one of these thicker pegs or one of those groundhog type pegs which have got quite sharp edges. Stay away from those ones and use these for spike hitches. I just keep them in an old GoPro bag. That's the British Army DPM version tarp.